Just 700 miles away, in Germany, the remains of one of the Second World War's most sinister secrets still stands on the Baltic island of Rügen. Hidden behind the pine trees lining the coast is a giant building complex, so mortifying it makes one's blood run cold. Originally hailed for its futuristic design, it was constructed to be imposing. It has 6 stories, over 10,000 rooms, and can hold over 20,000 people. At 2.8 miles in length, it's one of the longest buildings ever constructed in Europe and dominates the surrounding scenery. But what was this structure's real sinister purpose? And why was it abandoned? In 1936, Hitler has his eyes set on taking over Europe. But to do that, he needs soldiers, and lots of them. His solution is to construct the biggest brainwashing domain in the world, the Prora complex.
This is nothing but a modern-day mind control center. This is where German workers would go for an alleged holiday. But guess what? You're being woken up with a loudspeaker and told what to do, how to do it, and when to do it. You're gonna have your meals together, and in your so-called leisure time, you're gonna watch the same propaganda films and read the same propaganda literature.
The amount of time and money that went into creating the complex, you realize what an actually vitally important project it was for the Nazis. This was really the long-term game, which was to create a master race that thought like the Nazis thought.
It's not just the planned Nazi master race that was going to conquer the world. At the time, the mechanics and architecture of the Prora complex itself are state-of-the-art and form a physical example of cutting-edge engineering, construction, and design.
The concept was way ahead of its time in terms of what they were intending to produce. Yes, it was quite Spartan, but at the same time, you had this amazing complex that, of course, had an element of control planned or built into it. But for the average German worker, this would have seemed like nirvana. They would have come from industrial cities. They probably had never seen the sea before. So you can understand its attraction.
You have to imagine the whole intent was to make the holidaymakers step off that boat and say, wow, this is fantastic. There must have been a great deal of nationalism.
But how would the Nazis indoctrinate those who went there? And why was Prora abandoned? On the edge of the Second World War, it is one of the most top-secret projects for the Nazis. A place where thousands of German citizens were to become indoctrinated into the ideology of Adolf Hitler and the Third Reich. Katja Luca is a local historian who's an expert on the site.
People were to be manipulated and influenced here. The idea behind that was that people were to get maximum rest and recovery without having a single moment of spare time, to get fit and strong for the war, to achieve better work results, and actually also to be conditioned for mass murder. You could say that this is the Nazi ideology. We can actually see the notion of how the Nazis envisioned the people's community to be. There would have been an all-day program, starting with a morning assembly, followed by swimming in the sea, dinner, and a closing ceremony. Everything would have been elaborately organized.
But the Prora complex is also a masterpiece of design and engineering. The 2.8-mile-long building is divided into 8 6-story accommodation blocks, all constructed from reinforced concrete, a huge innovation at the time.
It would have been something that you'd never have seen before. So with that comes that impression of, wow, this is cutting-edge technology. This is advancement. We're at the forefront here. So it might sound quite dull to us today, reinforced concrete. Back then, it was really exciting.
Each block contains dozens of rooms overlooking the sea, all designed to be deliberately basic. Prora wasn't about luxury, it was about power. Its huge entrance halls are designed to have the same impact as the vast Nuremberg rally arena.
This room is part of the reception hall. It was built tall and mighty to impress the workers who would have come here. It was one way of having a great influence. If you came here, you would have felt intimidated, but at the same time, also uplifted by being part of such a great idea. This is how manipulation worked.
You look at Prora today, and it's sort of desolate. It doesn't have the grandeur that it was intended to have, and probably once did. If you look at some of the original designs, this has this great Aryan feel to it. You can imagine coming off the boat and saying, wow, what a great country is this?
Don't think you could see a structure back then in the 1930s like what there is at Prora and not be impressed by it, not feel as though, wow, this is something special and it's ours.
But what role did Prora play in Hitler's plans for world domination and genocide? And why was Prora finally abandoned? In 1936, the Nazi architect's plans for the key part of the Prora complex is a monumental auditorium capable of holding all 20,000 German laborers at the same time.
It's austere. It is everything that is grand about the so-called Aryan race, and it was designed to emit feelings of national pride, and you have to believe it had that very effect.
I think maybe you would be almost hypnotized by the sight that you've got in front of you. And maybe, yeah, the psychological effect of that worked to Hitler's hand.
But how could this site play a part in Hitler's plans for world domination and genocide? The ideological concept starts with an organization called Kraft durch Freude, or Strength Through Joy. Led by top Nazi Robert Ley, on the surface, Strength Through Joy just provides subsidized breaks for millions of low-paid German industrial workers. But its real mission is to unite them behind Hitler.
I think the Strength Through Joy organization had a very serious intention behind it, and that was to bind people to the Nazi regime. And probably even more than that, there was an attempt to brainwash people and prepare them for the possibility of war.
Propaganda was totally essential to the success of the Third Reich. They had to have everyone on board. So what Prora was an ideological way of making people feel really happy about giving 100% of their free time being indoctrinated with, aren't we the greatest? Isn't it worth the suffer? Shouldn't we all be in this together?
But in 1939, Hitler invades Poland and sets off World War II. And with that, the engineering of Prora is abandoned.
It is one of the greatest building legacies of the Nazis. And although the building never functioned like they planned it would, you can begin to understand what it was meant to be used for and understand their ideology.
At the end of the war, Prora is taken over by the invading Russian forces. who turn it into a military prison for those who oppose the communist regime. And when the Berlin Wall falls in the 1990s, Prora is finally abandoned.
Many believe the whole complex should have been leveled. Let's forget about this mind control program. It's a part of our dark past. Let's keep it there.
Now, the Prora complex is a powerful reminder of Hitler's ruthless ambition to totally dominate the thoughts and actions of his own people. Thankfully, the site never went into full operation before the Second World War ended. But today, in a strange twist, the Prora complex is being turned into luxury seaside apartments, complete with luxury designer furniture and balconies overlooking the Baltic Sea. In the neighboring country of France, deep inside the bleak and rocky alpine mountains above Grenoble, is an amazing engineering feat carved out